Hi, I'm Bob Thornberg, President and founder of SweetPro Feeds, and we're just delighted that you've taken the opportunity to spend some time learning about our product, and we want to be sure that we diligently explain what we do and why it's so important in the industry and for your cattle and for your horses. And SweetPro, it's a product that has been very different in that it does not focus on starch and sugar as an energy source, but it matches up with the energy source that forages represent. And that's a real important factor in these days. And with me today is Dr. Abe Scheaffer, a ruminant nutritionist who also is a specialist in the digestive tract and the intestinal tract in particular. And so what we want to do today is to explain the product line and also spend some time on the industry, which we know is really at a critical point and really a point of great opportunity, especially for the cow-calf man and the backgrounder, because many things are changing in the energy world. And the energy that we think of in feed, of course, is grain over the years, and corn is that mainstay in supplying energy, and over the years it's just been a major component of handling cattle, especially in the feedlot setting, but really backed up into the cow-calf operation as well. But increasingly this is getting awfully expensive, and it's changing the way we need to handle cattle. And one of the opportunities to really back away from starch and from sugar is really to the cattle's benefit, because that rumen was designed as a forage digesting organ, and if we can do a better job feeding that rumen, we feel that we can do a better job for cattle and improve the economies at the same time. So what you see here is the lick tub that was developed by SweetPro Feeds. It has been many years ago now, but really in the industry we're considered brand new, and a lot of people have never even heard of the company yet, even though we've been at it for 20 years. What we do is very different. We avoid the starch and the sugar component for energy, and we use the distillers grains that are the portion after you cook and ferment this grain. You're concentrating all of the protein, the fat, the fiber, the minerals, and you have distillers dried grains with solubles. A very different component, but really all the good part of grain concentrated down, and the part that, you know, we just like us, you know, we're not starving for starch and sugar in our diets, and really neither are the cattle. They are a forage-oriented machine. And so if they can take advantage of those things that are better for that rumen, they'll perform better. And that's what we've done, is to take that component and put the distiller's grain into a solid form. That's our carrier. So we start with a very good carrier, and we put very good components into it, very good mineral and very good digestive aid component with enzymes and a blend of other proteins, which we'll get into a little bit later too, in the component called probiotin. But basically what you see with the product line is a very high-tech nutrition in a low-tech dispenser. This block for pasture animals, they have to have the feed out on the pasture, and there's no mixing no mixing wagons, no feed bunks. You have to get that nutrition out to where they are, and so a large free choice lick supplement that's biodegradable to, you know, the majority of the material. In the future we even know that will be biodegradable in our plastic base. But you see this forkliftable slot, and you can see it clearly when we've got the cluster of 4. A forklift can go right underneath, and that saves the cost of a pallet. That's a non-nutrition cost in feeding normally. We've done away with it through the design. So these are some of the components, But the main thing is Distillers Grains as a carrier gives you a solid lick that stays solid even when it's hot weather. And so the idea of supplementing when you're on grass in the heat of the summer with a molasses that gets soupy and wet hasn't really been a factor, and people don't think in terms of supplementing on grass and pushing the animal so that they do better on forage. Well, that option is now available. And at an industry, and Dr. Scheaffer will kind of spend a little more time on this, but the industry is so pressed right now with the high cost of corn that we need to put more pounds on the pasture. And if we've got something that will work on the pasture during the heat, you know, we're just have so many more options.
So Bob, today it's what, 82, 83 degrees right now this morning. Kind of a hot day in this part of the country this time of year. But, you know, still look at this block, right? It's still holding up under these conditions. Okay, so this block goes in a cold environment, let's say 10, you know, from minus 10 to 10 above zero. The consistency doesn't change. And so, to me, in the usability of the product, you know, environmental conditions aren't a factor like they are in many other supplements, right? So that's one of the things that has sort of intrigued me about this product is just its user friendliness, both in a convenience factor as well as economically.
Well, that convenience factor was really a hallmark for developing the product in the first place, and we literally discovered early on we've got an economy factor that is even more significant. And the reason for that is with the product that does not have starch and sugar, you do not have a negative associative effect. And I'll say it in layman's terms, and then I'll ask Dr. Scheaffer to explain it in a little more detail. But the way I think of that is when the molasses licks have been in the marketplace, they've worked, and the way they work is that cattle will eat the lick. Unfortunately, the molasses changes the microbial population, and so that drops the pH of the rumen. It gets more acidic. And everybody's familiar with way too much starch or sugar really drops it to acidotic levels. But at any rate, it's always dropping the pH. So the animal will eat more forage to buffer the rumen back up, and more net dry matter intake has resulted in better performance. But they had that negative associative effect, that negative rumen pH drop. They had to counteract and then build on that with more dry matter intake.
So we would say here, this is a positive associative effect. So describe positive associative effect as you've described negative associative effect.
Well, and the way I look at it is if you don't have that negative to offset to get back to zero, it's a little bit like if you're making an investment in something and you know it takes you $500 out of your bank account, and then you are gaining ground, so you end up putting $500 back in, so you're $500 ahead, but there was a $1,000 swing to get to that point. And if you have a positive associative effect and you're building on that, you've gotten to that $500 ahead without a $500 recovery period. So you're twice as efficient because you've offset that negative associative effect.
So we might describe that as you don't go into deficit using a product like this as you would with a starch or sugar-based product.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's what's unique for the product line, and that's what the industry has had a very difficult time coming to grips with, because it's so contrary to the whole notion of energy. You know, starch and sugar has been the mainstay of the energy source, and that's understandable, but there's a more efficient delivery system now.
And one of the things that's unique about Distillers Grains, this product, compared to corn, is the for a ruminant animal, the basis for energy out of distillers grains is digestible fiber. The main energy out of corn is going to be starch. In the rumen, those different components function very differently and affect that environment differently. Corn decreases pH and changes the microbial population to being more able to function in that low pH environment, which is a different set of organisms. So you're changing the population. Distillers grains functions on the same organisms that digest forage, digest distillers grains fiber. So you're not doing a population change in the rumen feeding distillers grains, but yet you're getting an energy value out of it because that's how what the rumen is designed to do, is capture energy out of forage.
Well, and a key point too, when you're talking about those rumen microbes, that bacteria, that's microbial protein.
Right.
And the microbial protein is such an interesting area for this product because everybody talks about, they're used to buying their supplements on a protein basis. And we have come into the marketplace and basically we're saying, forget about that as your primary factor. Look for intake. And if you can get a pound of intake, then you're optimizing what the product can do. And because what happens is, if you've got a 20% protein or a 16% protein and they're only eating a pound, well, that's only 1600ths or 1800ths or 2000ths of a pound of protein in that pound. But if that rumen microbial flora is enhanced, that's the best of all protein. And as they go through their process of consuming the feed and giving off fatty acids for energy for the animal and then dying and being absorbed into the system as protein, we really influence the protein plane of nutrition significantly but subtly.
And that's the difference of the ruminant animal or the genius of the ruminant animal is what microbial protein is in the rumen and supplying that protein source to that animal. So one of the values of the SweetPro products based on distillers is feeding the rumen first, such that once the rumen bacterial population is adequately satisfied, then the nutrients that the bacteria generate themselves, or they themselves are the nutrients, and then the other components of the diet that are there go through the digestive tract and are available to the animal then. There is nothing you feed a ruminant animal that doesn't first have to go through the bacteria. And so optimizing the environment such that the bacteria perform well is really the goal of forage-based feeding of ruminants, okay? And that's where this product really fits well because it's enhancing what those bacteria can do and enhancing the bacteria themselves such that there's probably, and quantifying this is very difficult.
Yeah.
So I don't want to oversimplify that, but all the signs say that we're increasing the amount of microbial protein generated, and that's why you don't need the high protein content in your supplement because the bacteria are growing and you get more bacteria to the animal, and that's a better protein anyway, especially from an amino acid perspective, the microbial protein, than any protein source we're going to feed the animal.
Absolutely, and I think it speaks to the animal health.
Right.
If we're feeding the rumen, essentially is what we're talking about. If we're feeding the rumen and do a better job of keeping that healthy, the animal stays healthier, and there's a real dollar value to that.
And that gives that animal a lot of flexibility sort of in the environment they're in. As you all know, ruminants are in a very diverse set of environments, right? And some are adequate, many aren't. And for those places where a producer might have a challenge come up that they're not aware of, it's hard to anticipate. A product like this gives you gives your animals some flexibility in just being able to handle the variation that's out there. One of the classic things I think is good to think about from a producer perspective is from an animal health and well-being and ultimately performance perspective is reproductive efficiency or reproductive success. You don't know that your cows didn't get bred till you pregnancy test them in the fall. It's too late to fix the problem. And a product like this gives you some margin that your animals are able to deal with the variation that's in their environment, such that we've seen a lot of really increased pregnancy rates from producers using this product. And it's not that they had a problem to begin with, but adding the product increases their pregnancy rates by a significant amount. It varies 5, 10, 15%. We don't want to try to put a stake in the ground on that, but a better reproductive efficiency is always a really good thing for the cow-calf producer.
Well, it's dollars in the pocket.
Right.
And it's the kind of thing where we feel so strongly about the product line being able to be an economy for you because, the improved pregnancy rate's a little hard to put a number to that,
Right.
but it's more beef on the ground, at weaning time. But what we find is that from a real simple perspective, if this product is fed and that's the way they're getting their mineral supplementation, then at the same time they're getting their, a digestive aid, they're getting additional protein, they're getting bullets in a sense that are going to shoot at problems that they didn't even really kind of know they had. And in the end, you're going to wean a bigger calf. You're going to wean a heavier calf, and it just simply pays for the product on that alone. So if your weaning weights are 50 to 100 pounds, and that's kind of the norm that we see. It's almost always that we get 50 pounds more, sometimes 100 pounds more. We've had some, unusual situations greater than that, but that 50 to 100 pound range, if they're doing a really good job now, we might only get them 50 more pounds. If they've got some tough forage or tough challenges, we can maybe get them 100 pounds more because that overall plane of nutrition is improved. And not only does it totally pay for the product, but you're going to get other benefits, even down to soil fertility. Because it's pre-digested, and as the manure is disseminated out in the pasture, it'll break down sooner, and we hear a lot of comment about that. The manure breaks down sooner, gets reabsorbed into the soil quicker and more efficiently. And I've made this comment once before that as we're improving soil fertility, if we do a really good job, we'll be out of a job.
Sure.
Because they'll get enough out of the grass. Mm-hmm. So we're down to maybe 300-400 years worth of business cycle ahead of time. Right. But that's true. It will improve. And the people who have been on our product line the longest are actually starting to use different versions. We have the Magnum here on top. That's for the toughest conditions. And so, if we want them to eat 1 pound of this, they're probably on some pretty poor forages, almost straw-like in their characteristics. And then we've got the Fibermate 20. So if on Fibermate 20 they were eating 1.5 pounds or more, then we would go to the Magnum to try to get them back into that 1 pound range. And so that's the nature of the program. Isn't driven by protein, it's driven by total intake.
Well, and another aspect of the program that I really appreciate is that it's really a comprehensive product. There is some additional protein. It's not marketed, or we don't try to sell it as a protein supplement, but there's some protein there. We don't try to sell it as you don't try to sell it as a energy supplement, but there's some energy there. And we don't try to sell it only as a vitamin mineral package, but there's certainly vitamins, minerals there. I like the product because it brings everything that you need to deliver to your cattle that are grazing in one product. I don't have multiple little buckets or troughs that I need to fill. I put out this product and supplementation is taken care of.
Yep. And that's a big thing. It's convenient. It's 250 pounds, but even though it's 250 pounds, because it's cylindrical, I'll just tip this one up and you'll see how easily 250 pounds can tip on its side and be able to simply roll. Right. And so even though it's big and it's heavy, it can be rolled around, tipped, and handled. The forklift ability, as we mentioned before, the forklift slots, that's a patented part of this product. It's something unique to us. The straight sides, as simple as that seem, are very important because if you were trying to band that together and you had to have a tapered container, it's going to tip. You've got to have it on a pallet then. And so this component, the fact that that's biodegradable, the fact that that's a forklift slot, that saves the producer money. The fact they can use it in the summertime and it stays solid gives them a whole new option to put more pounds on pasture.
And on the ranch, I don't have a pallet bonfire at the end of the year.
Yeah, exactly. The pounds on pasture, that's a bigger and bigger issue. The industry is changing. It's too expensive to use grain like it used to be used. And so let's use what is remaining from that grain and use it more strategically in smaller quantities, match it up with forage. And in my judgment, it really creates a condition where the cow-calf producer is really in a whole new arena. The value of their calves is higher, and where in the past, usually, you know, if a 5-weight calf is going to be more expensive per pound than a 6-weight calf. Not anymore. They're paying premiums for the heavier cattle because they want to shorten the time on the feedlot. Well, that is literally doubling the opportunity for that cow-calf man to retain his animal longer, put those pounds on himself.
And that's what the ruminant is designed to do. I mean, so what you've got here is a supplement that's built to take advantage of how the ruminant, the physiology of a ruminant functions. And, you know, not that corn's a bad product or a bad supplement, but it's not, corn doesn't function as well in a rumen because of the starch. Just characteristic of the grain. Yep. But you take the starch out, and for a ruminant especially, you really increase the nutritional value of corn in this form compared to the natural form. And to me, that's another just value that's here that'll, you know, a lot of people are starting to understand more and more, and we just want to help others understand that this actually functions in your cattle better than corn does.
Well, you were commenting on a little bit is good. Normally people think more is better, but like fat, for example, in the rumen.
Right, so a little bit of fat supplementation is a high density calorie, right? You get a lot of energy out of a small amount of fat, but putting fat in a fermentation vat like the rumen is, essentially then you decrease the functionality of the microbial population if you go from a little bit to more. A little bit of fat in the rumen is okay. The microbes can deal with that, but if you overwhelm that population with fat, they start dying off, and then you have a serious problem. And so that's another aspect of the SweetPro products, because they're based on distillers, is you get a small proportion of fat on a daily basis. And when you're in an animal, when you're on this threshold of negative energy balance, a small proportion of energy, high density energy like fat, has a disproportionate positive impact. And so a lot of times producers see that and they're like, wow, maybe I should do more of that. Well, you do more of that, and all of a sudden you start compromising rumen function. And so one of the things another aspect I really appreciate about SweetPro is it's a little bit on a daily basis. And you don't try to market this as a little bit done you well, so a lot's going to be better for you. No, it's set up such that a little bit is what you need. And that's one of the aspects about it that I really appreciate.
Yeah, you let the forage be the mainstay on the production side of things. That's the cheapest energy source and really the best for the rumen.
Right.
So we're trying to feed the rumen
Right.
and just do it in a better way, and it's saving the producer money. And in an area, in an arena now,
Sure.
you know, the industry is so markedly changed, and we're suddenly having a hard time keeping up. Not a bad position to be in.
Background in calves producers that use the product have done pretty well on SweetPro products. Maybe even surprisingly well compared to what we might expect. So we can get into that another time, but I just wanted to kind of clarify that putting pounds of beef on your animals in a growing sense, on pasture, on forage, with a supplement like this has worked for a lot of people.
Well, it sure has. And when you were talking about the, that efficiency in putting more pounds on, it harkens back to where we started when we were talking about the negative associative effect. It all revolves around feed efficiency. Mm-hmm. And if you're feeding the rumen more effectively, it's more efficient. Right. And what we've seen is that and it's a big number, so get ready. Yeah. But in a maintenance diet, the forage requirements will drop 25%. In a growth diet, they may have the same intake, but then they will grow proportionately faster. And that's what it's really all about. It's better use of that forage, whether it's hay, you can put up less hay. If it's pasture, you can stock your pastures heavier. But it's an efficiency factor that the producer can take advantage of.
Yeah.
So we appreciate your being with us to have a little discussion about SweetPro products. There's a lot more to try to explain. And if you talk with your local dealer, they're particularly well established to make sure that the best product fits the forage in your area. And that varies around the country. So you want to work with the people that really have gone through that, understand it, and can help you improve it and utilize it to your advantage.